The internet decided Billy Bob Thornton was done with Landman. No warning. No official statement. No press release from Paramount. Just a wave of posts, clips, and breathless headlines flooding social media overnight, all pointing to the same conclusion: that Tommy Norris was finished, that the man holding the entire weight of West Texas on his shoulders was walking away from the show that made him one of the most talked about actors on television. Fans panicked. Comment sections exploded. People who had invested weeks into following the story of Tommy Norris suddenly felt the ground shifting beneath them. And for a brief, unsettling moment, it felt completely real. It felt like the kind of gut punch that television delivers without warning. The kind that leaves you staring at your screen wondering what just happened. But here's the thing about that moment. It was built on nothing. Not a single verified source. Not one confirmed report from anyone inside the production. Not a word from Paramount. Not a syllable from Taylor Sheridan. And not a single sentence from Billy Bob Thornton himself. The whole thing was a hoax. And the way it spread, the speed of it, the confidence of it, the sheer scale of how many people it reached before anyone stopped to ask a single question, that is the story worth telling. To understand why this rumor hit as hard as it did, you have to understand what Landman actually means to the people watching it. This is not a background show. This is not something people put on while doing something else. Landman is the kind of series that pulls you in and holds you there. It is built around tension that never fully releases, around characters who are always one bad decision away from losing everything. And at the absolute center of all of it is Tommy Norris. Billy Bob Thornton does not play Tommy Norris the way most actors approach a lead role. He does not perform the character. He inhabits him. Every scene Thornton appears in carries a specific weight. There is something in the way he moves through a conversation, the way he pauses before he speaks, the way his eyes say one thing while his words say another. That makes Tommy feel like a real man operating in a real and dangerous world. Taylor Sheridan built Landman around that quality. The oil fields, the cartel threats, the corporate negotiations, the fractured family dynamics, all of it filters through Tommy Norris. He is not just the lead character. He is the gravitational center of the entire series. Every other storyline in the show eventually bends back toward him. Remove him and you are not adjusting the show. You are dismantling it from the foundation up. That is the context you need to hold in your mind when you consider how the rumor landed. When someone tells you that the single most important character in a show you care about is being written out, your brain does not immediately demand evidence. It reacts. It feels the potential loss before it thinks critically about the claim. And whoever started this particular piece of misinformation understood that dynamic, whether they intended to or not. The posts that began circulating claimed that insider sources had confirmed Thornton's exit following season 2. The language was specific enough to sound credible. It had the rhythm of a genuine leak. It used phrases that entertainment reporting uses, words like sources close to the production and confirmed departures, phrases that carry institutional weight when attached to real journalism and carry almost no weight at all when attached to an anonymous social media account with no verifiable track record. But that distinction gets lost in the scroll. When you are moving through a feed and a headline stops you, you are not in the mental state of a you are in the mental state of a viewer. And as a viewer, your first response to that kind of news is emotional. The analytical part of the process comes later, if it comes at all. For a significant portion of the audience that encountered this rumor, it never came at all. They saw the claim, they felt the alarm, they shared it forward. And by the time anyone started asking for sources, the story had already traveled far beyond the point where correction could fully catch up. This is how modern misinformation operates. It does not need to be sophisticated. It does not need documentation or supporting evidence or any kind of infrastructural credibility. It only needs to be emotionally resonant and structurally familiar. The claim about Thornton leaving Landman was both, it felt like the kind of thing that happens in television because the kind of thing it described genuinely does happen in television. Actors leave shows. Contracts expire. Creative differences emerge. Production disagreements push talented people out the door. The history of television is full of departures that surprised audiences and reshaped beloved series. So when a rumor appears that mirrors the shape of something real, even without any of the actual substance of something real, the brain fills in the gaps. It says, this sounds like something that could be true. And then it moves forward as though that were sufficient. What made this particular hoax especially effective was the way it attached itself to the texture of the show itself. Landman Season 2 had been delivering exactly the kind of escalating pressure that makes audiences nervous. Tommy Norris was not sailing through the season. He was being pushed from every direction at once. The conflict with Dan Morrill, portrayed by Andy Garcia, had been building towards something that felt genuinely dangerous. The cartel threats surrounding the oil operations were closing in. The personal tensions within his family were fracturing in ways that felt irreversible. Every episode seemed to be raising the stakes, tightening the pressure, and positioning Tommy closer to some kind of breaking point. For viewers who were deep in that experience, the idea that the show might be preparing to remove him did not feel like a stretch. It felt like a logical extension of everything the narrative had been constructing. And that is where the hoax found its real power. It did not arrive in a vacuum. It arrived inside a story that had already primed its audience to expect loss. Taylor Sheridan's work has always carried the thread of consequence. In Yellowstone, major characters faced genuine danger and genuine endings. Sheridan does not protect his protagonists simply because audiences love them. He builds worlds where the cost of survival is always visible. Fans of Landman knew that they had absorbed that understanding across seasons, and it lived in the back of their minds as they watched Tommy navigate increasingly impossible situations. So when someone said the show was preparing to remove him, a portion of the audience heard it and thought, yes, that is exactly the kind of thing this show would do. They were not wrong about the show. They were wrong about the rumor. But the rumor had dressed itself in the show's own logic, and that made it extraordinarily difficult to dismiss on instinct alone. The spread accelerated from there. Short-form video platforms became the primary engine of amplification. A creator posts a 30-second clip suggesting Thornton is leaving. The algorithm serves it to people who have recently watched Landman content. Those people engage with it because the topic matters to them. The engagement signals to the algorithm that the content is performing well. The algorithm serves it to more people. Each share extends the reach. Each comment, even the ones expressing disbelief or demanding evidence, adds to the engagement metric and pushes the content further into feeds. Within the architecture of modern social platforms, outrage and anxiety perform identically to enthusiasm. The system does not distinguish between someone sharing a post because they believe it and someone sharing it because they want to debunk it. Both actions feed the same machine. Both actions make the rumor more visible. And visibility, in the absence of competing clarity from official sources, begins to function as a form of credibility. The more places you see a claim, the more your brain registers it as established. That is not a flaw in human reasoning. It is a deeply embedded pattern, and it is exactly the pattern that this hoax exploited. Without mercy, here is what actually happened when people started pulling at the threads. The rumor had reached a certain velocity by the time skeptics began pushing back. But pushing back required something the original claim never bothered to provide: evidence, and the search for evidence is where the entire structure of the hoax began to collapse. Not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly and systematically, the way a poorly constructed argument falls apart when someone simply asks the most basic question: where did this come from? That question had no satisfying answer. The posts that started the wave pointed to insider sources but never named them. They referenced confirmed reports but never linked to them. They used the language of journalism without any of the accountability that journalism requires. When followers of those accounts began asking for citations, for links, for any kind of verifiable foundation, what they received in return was either silence or deflection. More vague references to sources. More confident assertions without documentation. The kind of response pattern that, once you recognize it, is impossible to unsee. Paramount never issued a statement confirming Thornton's departure. That matters more than it might initially seem. In the television industry, when a lead actor exits a major production, the studio does not stay quiet. They cannot afford to. The financial implications of losing a flagship performer require immediate management. Investors, advertisers, and network partners all need clarity. If Billy Bob Thornton had genuinely decided to leave Landman after season 2, or if the production had made the decision to write him out, there would have been a coordinated communication strategy. There would have been a carefully worded statement acknowledging the change while positioning the show's future in the most favorable light possible. There would have been interviews. There would have been a farewell narrative constructed to preserve goodwill with the audience. None of that happened. Not because studios are always transparent, but because the complete and total absence of any institutional response is itself a data point. When nothing official emerges in response to a rumor of this magnitude, it is almost always because there is nothing official to confirm. Taylor Sheridan said nothing. His silence on the matter was treated by some corners of the internet as suspicious, as though a showrunner's failure to immediately address fan speculation constituted evidence of guilt. But that reading fundamentally misunderstands how creative productions operate. Taylor Sheridan does not run a show that responds to social media rumors. He runs a show that focuses on production. When you are in the middle of writing and producing a complex drama series with multiple interconnected storylines and a demanding production schedule, you do not pivot to address anonymous online speculation. You do not validate baseless claims with official denials, because doing so only amplifies the original noise. The decision to not respond is almost always the professional one. And Sheridan's silence was entirely consistent with how serious productions handled this kind of thing. It was not a signal, it was a standard operating procedure. Billy Bob Thornton himself gave the rumor nothing to work with. In interviews from the period surrounding season 2, Thornton spoke about his work on Landman with the kind of specificity and investment that actors simply do not display when they are preparing to exit a project. He discussed Tommy Norris as a character he found genuinely compelling. He talked about the emotional complexity of portraying a man who is constantly managing the gap between who he is and who the world needs him to be. He reflected on the challenge of working within Taylor Sheridan's storytelling framework, which demands a particular kind of restraint and precision from its performers. These are not the comments of someone counting down their final episodes. These are the comments of someone who is still inside the work, still discovering what the character has to offer, still engaged with the specific demands of the role. Actors who are leaving a series have a different energy in interviews. There is a retrospective quality to how they discuss the experience, a sense of looking back rather than looking forward. Thornton's comments had none of that quality. They pointed in one direction only, which was deeper into the story rather than away from it. The promotional evidence told the same story. Throughout the run of season 2, Paramount continued featuring Billy Bob Thornton prominently across every platform where Landman was being marketed. His image anchored the key art. His presence dominated the trailers. His name appeared first in promotional materials. Studios do not build marketing campaigns around actors. They are preparing to remove the financial investment required to produce and distribute promotional content is substantial. No network commits those resources to a performer who is on their way out the door. If there had been any genuine uncertainty about Thornton's future with the show, the marketing strategy would have reflected that uncertainty. It would have shifted emphasis toward ensemble elements, toward other characters, toward narrative arcs that could carry the story forward without him. That shift never happened. The promotional posture of Landman remained exactly what it had been from the beginning. A show built around one man's presence in one of the most volatile landscapes in American industry. Established entertainment outlets never touched the story as a confirmed report. Variety did not run it. The Hollywood Reporter did not run it. Deadline did not run it. These publications have the sources, the industry relationships, and the journalistic infrastructure to verify a story of this magnitude within hours if the underlying facts existed. Entertainment reporters at those outlets maintained direct lines of communication with studio publicists, talent agencies, and production companies. If Billy Bob Thornton had genuinely decided to leave Landman, someone inside that network of professional relationships would have confirmed it. The story would have appeared with attribution, with quotes, with the structural markers of verified reporting. Instead, those outlets remained completely silent on the matter as a news event. They did not report it as confirmed, and they did not report it as a rumor under investigation. They ignored it entirely, which in the language of professional journalism is about as clear a signal as you can send. When a story does not clear the basic evidentiary bar required for publication, it does not get published. And this story cleared nothing. What eventually happened in the comment sections and fan forums is instructive. As the rumor aged and the expected confirmation never materialized, the tone of the conversation began to shift. The initial wave of panic gave way to something more questioning. People started posting threads asking where the original claim had actually come from. Others began compiling the absence of evidence into a coherent counter-narrative. Someone would note that no major outlet had confirmed the story. Someone else would point out that Thornton's recent interviews contained nothing resembling a farewell. A third person would observe that the original posts making the claim had never produced a single named source. Piece by piece, the architecture of the hoax was examined and found to be empty. Not dishonest in an elaborate way. Not the result of some coordinated deception campaign. Just empty. A claim built on nothing, dressed in the language of credibility. Launched into an environment primed to believe it, and sustained entirely by the emotional response it generated rather than any factual foundation it possessed. The rumor did not die because it was officially refuted. It died because it ran out of new fuel. And when the engagement faded and the algorithm moved on to the next dramatic headline, what remained was simply the truth. Billy Bob Thornton was not leaving Landman. He had never been leaving Landman, and the show continued exactly as it had been built to continue. With Tommy Norris at the center of everything, there is a pattern worth examining here, and it goes well beyond Landman. The hoax that targeted Billy Bob Thornton and his role as Tommy Norris did not emerge from a unique set of circumstances. It emerged from a template, a repeatable, reliable, devastatingly effective template that has been applied to dozens of shows, hundreds of actors, and thousands of moments in entertainment culture over the past several years. Understanding that template does not just explain what happened with this particular rumor, it explains why it will happen again to another show, around another beloved performer, and why the next time it happens, a significant portion of the audience will fall for it just as completely as they did this time. Because the template works. Not because audiences are gullible, not because fans lack critical thinking, but because the template is specifically engineered to bypass the part of the brain that asks for evidence and speak directly to the part that responds to emotional stakes. And when you are talking about a show like Landman, the emotional stakes are exceptionally high. The template begins with a kernel of plausibility. Raw fabrication rarely travels as far as fabrication with a believable surface. The most effective entertainment hoaxes are not the ones that claim something impossible. They are the ones that claim something that sits just inside the boundary of what audiences can imagine happening. Billy Bob Thornton leaving Landman sits comfortably inside that boundary. He is an Academy Award-winning filmmaker and actor with a career that spans decades and formats. He has moved between independent film, studio productions, and prestige television throughout his professional life. His presence on Landman was celebrated precisely because it felt somewhat unexpected. A performer of his particular stature committing to a long-form television drama, that backstory made him a plausible candidate for departure in the minds of an audience that understands, even if only intuitively, that actors of his caliber have options. The rumor did not need to manufacture plausibility from scratch. It borrowed it directly from Thornton's own biography and professional reputation. From that kernel of plausibility, the template moves to selective interpretation. This is where out-of-context clips and misread interviews become weaponized. Thornton had spoken publicly about the intensity of playing Tommy Norris. He had discussed the emotional demands of portraying a man who carries enormous weight across every scene he inhabits. He had reflected on the particular challenge of working within a storytelling style that demands understatement and precision in equal measure. These are the kinds of reflections that serious actors offer when they are asked about serious